Welcome back, everybody. We're STR Intel coming at you from Colorado Springs. We're in one of our new listings again, and we are going to be talking about unexpected events and horror stories that have happened in the industry while we've been doing it. So it's going to be an interesting topic, and hopefully we have some good stories for you guys.
And hopefully some suggestions on how to prevent them from happening.
What's the first one that comes to mind?
Well, Phil, you've got a great one. You've got a wonderful hot tub story.
This is back to the very beginning. Back to the
famous hot tub story. So when we first started, I want to say it was maybe within our first maybe 4 or 5 months. And I think at that point we were still doing some cleaning, but we had kind of stepped away, and we hired some cleaning contractors. And I think this was on Christmas Eve, I believe. And me and Evan were out in Woodland Park chopping down Christmas trees, And we get a call from the cleaner, and he says something about, they wrecked the place. They had broken into the owner's closet, and I think they had smoked in there. And then the worst part was they had pooped in the hot tub. No, actually, I think they had broken the hot tub cover off, thrown up on it, and then pooped in the hot tub. So, and our cleaner was at the point where, hey, I'm not handling this. I'm not doing this. So me and Evan had to go respond to it. And we essentially had to, clean the hot tub out and drain it and deal with all that. And I think we'd even called the guests and asked them about it, and they denied it. And it's like, you just checked out. You just stayed here for a week, and you're saying it wasn't me.
I just remember us standing out because it was on a 3rd floor balcony, the hot tub was, and we were standing outside we went out there to check on it, and basically somehow the jets had come on, and the hot tub was already about half drained. And so now you had poop water spraying everywhere because the jets were on. And
flying everywhere.
Yeah, just everywhere. And so we ran back inside, and we looked at each other, and we said, somebody's got to go out there and turn it off.
It's like out of a movie.
Yeah, somebody's got to go out there. And then Philip just busted out of his shirt and just said, I'll do it. And he ran out there, and I still thank you to this day for doing that for us. Thank you for taking the hit on that one.
Thanks for ripping your shirt off.
Whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Well, very recently, this isn't necessarily a guest one particular, but in the Cascade area, so kind of up in the mountains here in Colorado Springs, me and Philip were up in the area, and we got to go to our podcast, and we got a call that a bear had gotten into a trash can, and this bear didn't just get into this trash can. It dragged it down into a gully that collects water and is almost sunk in like a sinkhole, and dumped it all throughout this gully. So it's dirty baby diapers, all sorts of food, just everything you can think of, styrofoam plates, spaghetti.
It was a bear-proof bin, too.
Yeah, it was in a bear-proof case.
This bear was serious.
This bear was after those diapers. And so we're in our dress clothes right after this podcast, with sticks, straddling over this gully, trying to dig this stuff out, and then we have to drag the trash can up back from behind the home because it sits on this pretty steep slope overlooking the mountains. And it was the smell, the fun.
How could you have prevented that? How does one prevent a bear?
I'd say, just a better enclosure for the actual bins themselves.
Yeah.
I think the enclosure they had was metal, but it was almost like a very thin metal, and they just went right through it. So if you're in bear country, wood is probably not going to stop a bear, because we've had several fences broken down.
Yep.
And then, thin metal won't even stop it. Those things they want that trash.
Well, one of the bigger issues we face, and this happens every year, but I just remember our first summer here in Colorado Springs, for whatever reason, they decided not to install AC units in most of the homes here in Colorado Springs. So we just didn't expect that when we had first started the business, and ended up being our biggest cause of bad reviews was no AC in the homes. And for obvious reasons. I mean, it's pretty hot in this home, actually. And does it have AC?
Central AC upstairs.
Yeah. But it's, we had to come up with a contingency plan on, okay, we have to go kind of get through this summer, and we have to get window units and the units that don't have AC. And then, we had to come up with a contingency plan for the next year. How do we make this happen? I think at this point, haven't we decided that we don't allow homes with no AC because it was such a big issue?
It has to be a true AC unit. No swamp coolers.
Yeah, in a swamp, it has to be either multiple window unit ACs or a central AC. But, there's just always these unexpected issues that come up in this complex industry, and it's how do you anticipate them, for one, but then how do you respond to them once they happen? And this industry has so many. I mean, the amount of we probably see something new every day, something new that we didn't expect.
Yeah, and it's location dependent too, because even with central AC, I don't know if we ever figured this out, if it's the elevation of Colorado or not, if it's the thin air, but central AC systems tend to freeze up like crazy for us. And I don't know if it's just the elevation that causes that, but that's even something, even after we solved, okay, we got to have AC in the homes. Absolutely. Even then, we still have ACs freezing up, and, at 70, 72 degrees, which is standard for most people, they're freezing up. So yeah, we had to come up with a plan for that to make sure people weren't setting the ACs too low or even locking some of them down too.
Yeah. Yeah, because most of our guests come from Texas. They're used to having rock solid AC, and they come here and they don't get it. So then they start trying to jack down the AC to 55 degrees, and then that makes the problem even worse. It freezes up, and then you got to wait 24 hours for it to unfreeze. So.
Yeah, and sometimes it takes even longer. Sometimes it's 48 to 72 hours for it to unfreeze, and then that could be someone's entire stay. What do you do there?
Right.
It's difficult. But yeah, probably setting the expectations beforehand, letting people know, locking it down if people aren't getting it, if guests aren't getting that idea. Yeah, just locking it down, setting parameters. I mean, there's Nest thermostats you can set parameters of. We can't go lower than 70, can't go higher than 74. I mean, yeah, there's smart technology to kind of fix those issues now.
Yeah.
What would you say about, and it's happened to us a couple times, but maybe for the person who's dealing it for the very first time, where a guest maybe leaves illicit or even potentially, illegal things in the home, how to handle that, who to call, what if your cleaner teams find it, and maybe not necessarily you as the owner. Just some general thoughts on
that. And we've had probably 4 or 5 times in the last year where someone's left an actual firearm on the property.
Yeah, I mean, this is it's not a funny story, but there's a little bit of humor in this story. This guest, one of these guests had left what turned out to be a firearm in the closet of a home, and everything was fine about their stay. As a good guest, they checked out, they reached back out to us, needing to get back in the home because they had left a very important ring. I don't remember if it was an engagement ring or they claimed it was an engagement ring or a wedding ring or whatever it was. But we took them at their word for it, and we let them go back in. The home was just being cleaned up, turned over. But in the meantime, we had found the firearm in the home, and we kind of caught them in a lie. They went to the home. They found out that it wasn't there anymore. I believe at this point, we had already handed it over to the police, and they had to kind of come clean with us. Like, hey, we weren't there looking for the ring. We had actually left our firearm there. Do you guys have it? Can we get it back? And at that point, I was just say, hey, that's been turned over to the police. You can handle that through those channels.
Yeah. Make sure you use gloves. You don't want any fingerprints on that firearm.
Gloves. And it's not a scared thing, but maybe if you're doing your cleaning, obviously it's you finding it. If you have a cleaning team do it, maybe give them a prep or a heads up on how you'd like it handled. Are they using gloves? They should never bring it in their car. Ideally, it doesn't move from the property. And if it's something illicit, just getting it into the proper authorities' hands immediately, and not having a game of telephone happen, the cleaners brought it to here and then it passed off to this person, etc.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing you want to happen is a cleaner takes firearms and drugs or whatever,
yes.
And they're driving around with it and they get pulled over, and now they've got to come up with a story of why they have that stuff in their car, or
Exactly.
it's just not a great situation to
Yeah,
be
and
in.
it could be someone's just concealed carry too, and they more than likely it's going to be loaded. I know, it's going to be sitting by that bedside and it's going to be loaded. Um, Proper protocols for that as well, even if it is a legal firearm that someone just left.
Yeah.
Last thing you want is, well, you want to make sure you find it, because last thing you want is a guest checking in and someone's kid finding it. That would be worst case scenario.
Terrifying.
So make sure
Yeah.
your cleaners or whoever's inspecting and looking at your property knows these common areas where people can leave firearms in the bedside stands, in the closets, those type of things, looking under beds, because you just never know, and
and I'm
that's
glad
a
you
huge liability.
Safety.
pointed out. I mean, this isn't nefarious. These people aren't doing this nefariously. Like there's hunting, there's shooting ranges, there's concealed carries, etc. Yeah, just prepping your cleaning team. Hey, this is something that is a possibility that can happen.
Yeah. Well, it kind of goes into, some of the dark sides of the industry, in the sense that I don't think many people really talk about this,
I
but
agree.
it's a touchy subject too. And it's very rare that incidents, safety incidents, safety is a big focus of ours right now. We haven't had any big, incidents where a guest has gotten hurt or killed, or luckily, but I know it happens in the industry, and it's up to us to make sure our guests are safe and to make sure we're protected and our owners are protected liability wise. It's a big concern. You don't want to have any huge safety things within the home, and it's you want to make sure you have the right insurance too, just in case something goes wrong. But we're actually going to be having a special guest from a company, and they specialize in safety on a podcast in a month or two. And but yeah, it's kind of the dark side of the industry, where you really want to protect yourself, and you really want to make sure you have your ducks in a row before you start doing this.
What about when someone, and Evan, I think you got a story for this one. What about when someone moves into the home, meaning they're bringing all of their personal stuff or just a ton of stuff, and they refuse to leave
Yes.
when their checkout
Right.
happens?
So we had a guest that was, obviously I won't mention any names, but they booked a stay for 3 weeks. They didn't have tenant rights, obviously, because that's over 30 days. So more like a hotel. They booked one for 3 weeks, and we were just having constant issues with this guest. The neighbors were calling us, hey, there's multiple bags of trash and somebody's things on the front lawn, and it stayed there for multiple days. And we responded, hey, can you get your trash out of the yard? Can you get your stuff off the porch? And then it comes for time for them to check out, and it's been 3 weeks since they've been there, and they won't leave. So the cleaners get there, and they won't leave. And so we're like, okay, we'll give you 2 hours to pack your things and leave. And then we come back and they're still there, and then we give them another 2 hours and we come back and they're still there. And then at the end of the day, the lady ended up being paraplegic, so she was in a wheelchair.
Jeez.
And
That made it tough too.
that made it tough, yeah. Because we know we've got another guest checking in, and we really need to get the home clean before the next guest gets there. And but going into the home, the massive amounts of stuff, like it was almost like a hoarder had accumulated all this stuff within 3 weeks, and it took, we had to cancel the next guest. The home was just packed to the brim with trash and different stuff, and it didn't seem like she was going to leave without us kind of, hey, we've got to have you leave. Let's help you find another accommodation. We've got another person checking in here at that time, and they'd been canceled. But, that was a really hard situation to deal with,
There's a bit of diplomacy.
Yeah.
Very recently, we had a guest, unfortunately, check into a home, and the credit card got declined, and they had already checked in. And it's very rare, but mistakes happen. Technology can fail, and they checked into the home. And so, of course, we have to go out there and we have to try to collect payment, but there's this very fine balance of diplomacy. And Phil actually handled this situation, the lady, and from what it sounded like, there was 2 guests, and it was either a boyfriend or a husband, but essentially kind of left her at the Airbnb with no method to pay, no car, and he'd be returning in a little bit. So we gave her that little extra time. We returned. No one's there. No one's present. We couldn't find any signs of like issues or damage or illegal activity. And so we just had to make a discretion call. At this point, they're checking out in the morning. It's already 9:30 or so in the evening. And if there's no damage, that might be something that you almost have to write that one off in a sense. Like, hey, if there's no issues happening, then maybe this is when you have to let go in that sense of diplomacy, because maybe that lady was in a tough spot, but also we have to help her find other accommodations. You have a business that you have to keep pushing forward.
Yeah, and I mean, usually in those situations, for whatever reason, let's just say it's a dispute or they do a credit card dispute, it's a stolen credit card, we'll end up just paying out the owner and making it right, because obviously it's
mistakes
just gonna
happen.
It's gonna happen. It's rare, luckily, but yeah, I mean, diplomacy is so important because you don't want to come in hostile to them, because I think that is the temptation too, is to come in hostile and say, hey, get out of my house, this is my house, you better leave. But that never ends up going the way you want it to go. But when you have a sense of diplomacy, hey, here's why I need to get you out of the house, here's why you have to leave, and you kind of like explain it to them logically, eventually, maybe not at first, but eventually they'll see you as their ally and not their enemy.
Absolutely. I mean, I commend Phil for this one. That's essentially what happened. I mean, when you go and tell a guest like, hey, a car didn't go through, there's a shock value for that. They probably are aware, maybe they know about it, but they're essentially being asked to vacate what's a home for a couple of days, and that's kind of a shock. And if you go about it with little to no diplomacy, it's going to heat up very quickly, and the guest is going to begin picking apart any flaws with like the property or where they are, and it just is going to steamroll into something more than it needs to be. And I think you had done an excellent job of handling that. The guest's initial shock was like, I'm being kicked out of the home. What am I supposed to do? And after a little bit more of the story, it's like, hey, well, let's give them a little bit more of a chance. Let's see if we can work with them. And that's
and if
difficult.
it's a credit card situation too, a payment situation, don't just assume it's a fraudulent credit card or they're freeloading. It could just be they inputted their credit card information wrong. Evan, we did this a couple of weeks ago. We went to collect gas payment, and it just turned out one of the numbers was wrong on the card, or the CVC code was wrong, and that was it.
Yeah, she was the nicest lady.
So,
she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Let me pull up my credit card and pay you.
Take care.
And it was done. So it's...
Yeah, start from the lowest point and escalate up. And I'd say at the very top of that would be, calling the police, especially if there's illegal activity going or they're causing damage to the property. You can call the police and they will remove them from the property. But again, do your due diligence and try to make it work first. If that's trying to help them find other accommodations, or, depending on the situation, or seeing if they can extend or something like that, start there and then work your way up to escalated scenarios like asking them to leave or even calling the police.
Well, starting with questions, one comes to mind. An owner reached out to me and they were saying, I'm seeing the guests go in here with basically 5-gallon buckets, like looked like 5-gallon buckets, water jugs, and what appeared to be car batteries. And so the immediate assumption with this owner was that there was some nefarious activity going on, like drug manufacturing. Frankly, was the thought, like meth, which is a big deal in itself. But especially when you combine that with real estate, it becomes even a huger issue. But it actually, through inquiring, so the owner, understandably, was a little heated. It was a little worked up and wanted to go to the property immediately. But through questioning, I believe what turned out, it was a group of people in town for some type of sponsored bike event, and the batteries were to hold down like the start part, like a banner of some sort, and of course the water jugs and the 5-gallon buckets were like snacks for the event and stored water. So there's just so much more that could potentially be going on, and not to just go off the handle immediately with any guest.
Yeah, don't make those assumptions. Even
meth
if you're not
bike
at the property,
race.
maybe you got a camera there and you see that.
Yes.
Yeah, it may look it may look like something it's not. So
well, then you're caught
at
at
the
a
end of
point
the day, that guest is still a person, and you don't want to make assumptions because that's just going to blow up the situation a lot more than it needs to be.
Or you end up apologizing to the guest because now you're in an embarrassing situation where you called them out for something they weren't actually doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's how I kind of handled that one. It could have just been, a wrong credit card number. It may have been inputted wrong. That may be the only issue. So let's just try to run it again, see if we can make it work. Or do you have another card we could run? And just start there. Just assume that they have the best intentions first.
Yeah. I mean, I think the kind of going back to preventative, like how do you preventative maintenance, preventative quality assurance, all this stuff to try to prevent, those are kind of the things guest misconduct. But let's say unexpected things that could go wrong in the house, how do you prevent that stuff from happening? And we've just got started. We've had kind of a preventative maintenance program for a few years, but it hasn't been quite up to what we want it to be. And so we just hired several more maintenance guys to run a preventative maintenance program for our houses and try to catch the issues before they get to the guest or before the owner shows up and, something's wrong with the house. It's, how do we prevent these things from happening before the guest ever notices it? And that will hopefully reduce our maintenance workload. That'll reduce our bad reviews.
I was going to say, what are those major amenities? I mean, we're talking about your water heater, your washer, dryer, making sure with your dryer you're cleaning out the lint trap. Of course, that's a fire hazard. What is it? Is it yearly getting your hot water heater cleaned out?
Yeah, you could do a hot water flush.
Kind of
I mean, that could be every 2 years too, but I think every year is the standard.
I mean, even those little micro things like cleaning out shower drains and bathroom sink drains, that can go from just being a little bit clogged up to an issue pretty fast. And if you can just catch it, and if you can catch it when you can just snake it simply or use some type of not chemical, but maybe something biodegradable to clean that out before it becomes a point where you have to have a plumber out or you have to move a guest because the sink's overflowing.
Yeah, you'll end up saving money in the end too.
Yes.
Because that happens no matter what, right? Your sink drains are going to get clogged up with hair or things over time. That happens to everyone pretty much. Maybe not me. My hair's kind of short, so I don't have that issue. But for people with longer hair, your drains are going to get clogged either way. So maybe quarterly or at least yearly, check those and clean them out.
Yeah.
Which, like you said, Killian, it's easy. You can just snake it out really easy.
Yeah, and I mean, smoke detectors, changing those, hitting your lawn care fall and spring cleanup, so it's a presentable property when the guests get there. The thing we got to realize too in this industry, there's no governing body for us. Usually, in most states or most cities, there's no governing body like a hotel has, where they have all these governing bodies that tell them they have to have exit signs and they have to have smoke detectors that are certain type.
Hallways are certain amount of distance wide. Stairs are X amount of inches tall on each step.
Warehouses have OSHA, which tell them exactly how they should store chemicals. And there's no governing body in this industry, so we almost have to self-govern too, from a safety perspective and a preventative maintenance perspective. It's it's coming up with what are the key things you want to hit at your home every year to prevent guest issues from happening, or quarterly or semi-annually. Deep cleans, making sure you're getting a semi-annual or annual deep clean, because your cleaner's probably not going to be doing a deep clean every time. They're not going to be getting behind. They're not going to be hitting the baseboards every time. They're not going to be, getting up under the fridge. But if you have a semi-annual deep clean, your home is probably going to stay in a certain state for its lifetime.
And
where you can catch those major issues that are occurring. I mean, even things as simple as checking furniture to make sure it doesn't need tighten, it's not loose, or handles and doorknobs, all those little things that, like you said, on a regular clean, a cleaner's not going to have enough time to do all these things.
Yeah. Well, we're taking a new strategy on furniture too, because I swear, like half of our maintenance tasks are tightening furniture. Like our maintenance guys are out there with a screwdriver just tightening furniture all day.
Tightening furniture.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, there's got to be a better way to do this. Let's find. Maybe we need to go with more commercially grade commercial grade, like those bistro dining chairs we were looking at. They're just one solid piece rather than dining chairs that have, 40 different 40 different parts to them.
It almost feels like every dollar you try to save on the initial setup of the short-term rental is $1.50, $2 you're going to pay later to have it taken care of.
Yeah.
And that's from the quality of furniture to the quality of your mattress to the the sticky handle, like you said. It just perpetuates. It's like if your alignment on your car was out. Just over time, you're just causing more and more damage to the car, and it might not be evident up front. And I think that's a huge difference between long-term rentals and short-term rentals. Like, you sign a long-term tenant in there, and the alignment on that car is off, and you visit that home again after a year. I mean, that's going to be a mess. That's going to be a headache. But if you can always be just doing that little proactive maintenance, checking the oil, looking under the hood, then you're going to be able, and doing it from the beginning, you're going to be catching a lot of these things proactively instead of waiting for them to happen. Like, don't skimp out on your bar stool that you keep having to tighten up. Go get another bar stool. Solve the issue. Be proactive.
Any specific examples you guys can think of like where maybe an owner just didn't want to fix something, or they didn't have the funds to fix it, but it just kept being an issue for guests? That's
a difficult one. Coming from the business development, the onboarding side, when a lot of it's about the money they want to spend and getting the home ready. One that comes to mind is these folks tried to set up kind of a reading corner library in the home, and it was a last minute add-on, and so it was, for lack of a better word, essentially like a college futon, a Goodwill bookshelf that doesn't match anything. That almost that one room alone, because it was kind of the half done room, has caused that home trouble.
The futon broke, or
yeah. Yeah.
Yo, headboards, bed slats.
Yes.
Listen, people are having sex in these short term
yes,
whether you like it or not. And the amount of beds and headboards and bed slats that we've had broken, a lot of it came down to it was just a cheap bed. But buying good quality furniture, buying good quality bed, including the mattress, because even if it's not something that has to do with sex, maybe it's just guests are sleeping in the bed and it's squeaky anytime they move, right? That's no fun. That's no good. But yeah, buying good quality beds and headboards. I know maybe a better idea would be mounting the headboard to the wall, those type of beds.
Mm-hmm.
But these cheap IKEA ones, they don't hold up very well. Those
Sorry,
end up
IKEA.
getting replaced pretty quickly.
You suck.
And it's
I'm IKEA's biggest.
Sorry,
fan,
IKEA. Yeah. Remember that one time where our first house, we thought buying a bunch of IKEA furniture for a 5-bedroom house would be a great idea, and starting with an empty house.
No, we spent
3
like
weeks.
2 weeks, like 3 hours per 2 dressers per bedroom and a bed and everything. Yeah, we spent 2 weeks doing that. It was miserable. Terrible.
I remember because I was in the Air Force at the time. I'd gotten off and I'd come over there, and you were still building furniture, and you were basically like singing to yourself because you had gone insane from building furniture all day. Yeah.
I didn't have any internet or anything at the house. It was just an empty house with a bunch of furniture.
No AC or anything.
So just losing my mind.
Yeah.
Well, for guests, that's an unknown variable. A lot of things are going to pop up with guests. You just have to be able to be on your feet and respond to them with diplomacy and ask questions. But when it comes to just trying to reduce any issues in the home, the best way to go about it is as proactive as possible. There's no fail safe. You can screen the guest. You can do everything you need to do. But at the end of the day, there's Murphy's Law. You go back to that a lot, Phil. And you just need to be proactive, and you need to be on your toes.
Yep, I would fully 100% agree with that. It's preventative maintenance. It's preventing the issues before they arise from a guest screening perspective, from a pricing perspective, from what type of furniture you're buying in the home. approach this with Murphy's Law in mind and preventing what can go wrong from going wrong. But that's all we got for this week. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Woohoo!